All right. I think I'm live. Sorry for being a couple minutes late there. I was getting some strange lag on the computer, but hopefully that won't be a problem. We'll just have to see. As always, I'm just going to talk randomly until I see some people comment saying that they can hear me and see me and all those kind of things. Then we can start. Of course, if you can hear me and you can see me, then feel free to start asking questions so that I can jump into those as soon as those show up. Just working through the delay at the moment, realistically. So we should be good to go. Let's see here. I know I had a bunch of lag spikes last month when I did this, especially with trying to control the chat on screen, which was kind of frustrating. And then when I went to try and fix it afterwards, I could not replicate the problem, which is also super frustrating. So I haven't actually changed anything from last month. Oh, great. People said they can hear and see me. Awesome, awesome. So I haven't actually changed anything from last month. So hopefully I'll be able to control the chat on screen. I really hope that's the case. If not, then it's a strange problem that is not replicatable, and maybe I'll have to go back to the drawing board or something like that. Yeah, so feel free to start asking questions. It's great to see so many people here already. Looks like there's 13 people here already. That's awesome. In fact, once a couple more lines of comments come in, I'll be able to prove to myself that I can scroll the chat, and that will make me feel a lot better. Because in OBS, which is what I use, I have like a separate interact window that lets me see the chat in this little box, and hypothetically, I can scroll things up and down. And of course, it works perfectly fine when I go to debug issues. But last month, it was just super, super slow, juddering up and down. Anyway, I could keep rambling on about OBS and my struggles with it if you like, but feel free to ask any questions anybody might have. Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, feel free to go for it, and then we can jump right on in. Looks like, wow, there's 19 people here now. So yeah, feel free to ask questions away. I don't have anything loaded at this point just yet. What kind of questions to ask for? I mean, hypothetically, board game related questions is what I prefer. You can ask anything you want, realistically, as long as it's, not disingenuous, and I'll answer it or I won't. I just kind of play it by ear, but feel free to ask whatever you feel like, and we'll see how it goes. This is live. We'll just see where it goes. Hey Knox, thanks for dropping in a little bit. Okay, cool. Let's see. Can I scroll? Kind of. It's a little laggy, but I can scroll the chat a bit. So hopefully we'll make that all work. All right. I think on that note, we can give it a shot. We can go for it. All right, the first question is coming in from Lilia, and they asked, when are you planning to get new gear? Now, I specifically mentioned this in my update vlog that I put out about a week ago, that I was considering maybe getting some new gear or just doing some modifications to the studio so that I could, make the videos look a little bit better. For the most part, my videos have looked just like this for years and years, and this was a huge step up in quality from what it was like before I bought a fancy camera and lights and all that kind of stuff. But it's come to my attention that my videos are fine, but they definitely are outshone by many other people in the board game media sphere. So I'm not really sure. Honestly, I haven't put any time into it. This last week kind of got derailed in some other ways that I don't really feel like going into. But the first big thing is, honestly, the first thing I kind of want to try is just pulling out my iPhone and recording myself with the iPhone. Just do some test video with that and just compare it side by side with the lighting like it is. I say, this is my plan. This is Jessica's plan. She's very smart and great at debugging, and it was her idea to just not spend any money and just try something else before we actually spend money and invest in some new stuff. I do think lighting is a big thing. You can't tell hypothetically right here, but when I don't modify the lighting at all in Final Cut, this looks super red, like a red wash all the way over the camera. So I have to do a bunch of post-editing. Well, I have a preset thing to get rid of the red and try to balance things out. And maybe I just haven't balanced it very well, and maybe it would just look better if I didn't have to do that processing. So no definitive thing about the gear just yet. It's definitely a thing that's on my mind, but I don't have a plan of action for it yet. JC says, something that has bothered me since I started following. You are so energetic. I don't know if it's exaggerated by the editing, but you pack a lot of content into a small time frame. I try to do that. Honestly, I'm pretty embarrassed about the content I used to make, specifically like 5 or 6 years ago. If you think this is high energy, watch my like Scythe video or something like that. Like I'm just like yelling at the camera, and I start every video off with this like huge grin, and it just looks so weird to me now. I mean, that's kind of the way life is, I guess. When you record yourself and then you look back many years later, it's easy to cringe at what things used to be. So I feel like I'm much more subdued than I used to be, but I also feel like this is more an authentic version of me, or at least an authentic version of board game me. Like I'm not this energetic about everything in life, but I'm very energetic when it comes to board gaming. And, you know, I'd be lying if I said I didn't have a bit of a, I guess, personality or a persona, I guess, for John Gets Games. I'm not a totally different person when the camera is off, but I definitely do have a bit of a John Gets Games persona, which just kind of clicks in when I turn this thing on. And I like to think that I'm not being disingenuous and that it's close enough, but it's hard to, you know, split those two things apart, if that makes sense. And as far as, you know, my energy and whatnot, I don't know. I think maybe part of that's just habit with the camera. I can be pretty low energy when the camera is off. And you know, things ebb and flow for the most part. But one thing that has been even for like 14 years now is my love for board games. And so I think I try to channel that when I, you know, turn on the camera and start talking to it. JJ also asked, how do I motivate and keep up that energy? Again, maybe just a habit. You know, it's kind of a thing that I've been doing for so long. And yeah, like I said, just channeling the board game joy that I have into it definitely makes things better. But I would be lying if I said that, you know, it's always super easy. Like last week, I had a couple of days, honestly, where I got very little done, frustratingly little done. Like I look at my task list and I record like an hour and a half of productivity in an entire day, which is frustrating. You know, I'm my own boss. I'm a one-person show over here, realistically. And so when I see that, I worry about the future. Like, oh, well, I barely did anything that day. That's going to maybe put me behind in the future. And then, you know, stress can come in and all those other things. And, you know, most of those things I try to not have on screen. Like I definitely talk about it more in the update vlogs than any other content. And I guess I'm talking about it here. But yeah, it's not always easy to stay motivated for sure. But you know, it's my full-time job, so that's definitely a thing that I try to focus on as well. Hey, NJ's here. Oh, let's see. A chat a little laggy, a little bit. Come on. I don't know why it gets so laggy when I do this, but I had no problems with it when I was trying it earlier. Okay, here we go. All right, NJ is here. Thanks for joining in. Just randomly started playing Civ 6. Did you ever play any Civilization style games? It seems like they might appeal to you as a board gamer. For the most part, no. I played Civilization New Dawn for a bit. I think that was the one on the iPhone. And I played a bunch of 4xe space kind of games, like when like in the 90s, like some of those things that were on computers. But I haven't really got into those things recently. And I think a big part of that is just the fact that I'm not really a solo gamer. And even though these Civ games are video games, they still feel like solo game experiences because for the most part, you're playing against computer AIs. And the same kind of thing snaps into place with me and not really enjoying playing solo board games. I just prefer playing gaming structures with other people. And I know you can play a lot of those Civ games with other people as well. It's just not something that I've really dug into. So I think thematically, I've always enjoyed the Civ type theme, especially when it comes to board games. But yeah, I haven't really dug into the video games. I will say that one of the newest Civ games was on a pretty deep discount on the Switch store, and we have a Nintendo Switch. And last week, I was tempted. I was like, man, you know, it was like, I don't know, $10 or something like that, maybe a little bit more. And I was like, maybe I would try it. Maybe I would enjoy it because of the board gaming thing, but it wasn't quite enough to push me to try it yet. So maybe it'll happen at some point, but I don't have a super deep history with them. Victory BHG asks, "What are my favorite Uwe Rosenberg? What's my favorite Uwe Rosenberg game?" That one is a pretty easy question to answer because it's A Feast for Odin with the Norwegians expansion, and I say it's pretty easy because that is arguably one of my favorite games. Period. Like top 2, 3, sometimes 1. Depends on what day you catch me. I love A Feast for Odin, and I've loved it since I first played it. But it was kind of like an 8 out of 10 game for me until the Norwegians expansion came in. And that was almost like a patch fix for all of the issues that I had with the game, and that skyrocketed it up into being a 10 out of 10 game. I adore A Feast for Odin with the Norwegians expansion. It's amazing. By the way, thanks to everyone who is here. Oh, 27 people. Awesome, awesome. Chris asks, what are some 6-player games you enjoy that aren't party or super light games? Well, another easy solution to that one is Concordia Venus. Concordia Venus is technically an expansion to Concordia, although you can buy it as a standalone thing. But in my opinion, it's almost more of a sibling game to Concordia than an expansion because it brings in team play, and specifically you can play fully competitively, which I haven't tried, or you can play 2 versus 2 or 2 versus 2 versus 2, which would be 6 players. I would say that 6-player Concordia Venus is easily my favorite 6-player non-party style game. I have played a few games of Sidereal Confluence in the past. That plays up to 9, I think, and I have played it at 6 and had a really good time with it. I wouldn't say it's my favorite game. I've enjoyed playing it, but I don't desperately find myself going out to try and play it. But that one's quite fun. Oh, Captain Sonar. What a great 6-player game. I can't remember what my favorite player count is for that one. I can't remember if it was 8 or 6. I think it might actually be 6 players. It's been several years since I played that one, but it's a simultaneous team versus team sonar hunting, seeking out game. It's fantastic, honestly. I still have a copy of it. It's been a while since I played, but I would certainly enjoy playing that one again. So I think the top 2, I'd say, is Captain Sonar and Concordia Venus for playing 6 players without it necessarily being a party-style game. Victory BHG asks, do I play large miniature board games? You just saw an Ankh review on Dice Tower. For the most part, no. I'm not against it. I just rarely have an opportunity to because I don't find myself gravitated towards those like big CMON type or Fantasy Flight type, games with lots of miniatures and all that stuff going on. I've never played Blood Rage, for example. It's one that I've been interested to try for a while, but never enough to make it happen. I actually played Rising Sun for the first and only time about 3 weeks ago or so, and honestly, it didn't really impress me. The game itself, I had a great time with the people and everything, but the game itself didn't really do that for much for me. I like good component quality in my games, and I like good art, but I wouldn't say I am particularly swayed by miniatures at all. I would be totally fine playing board games with 0 miniatures for the rest of my life. I would love it if the boards are beautiful and the cards are beautiful, and I love all that stuff, but miniatures just don't really do anything for me. They're not necessarily a detractor, but a lot of these games seem to be very miniature forward, and that just does not do anything for me. I haven't watched any videos about Ankh at this point. It was a similar situation where I saw it pop up on Kickstarter. It seemed to be very, look at all these miniatures, and there's a board game attached to it, and so I didn't really pay it any attention. If people start saying it's great, then maybe I'll, try to find an opportunity to actually try it, but that's not really the kind of thing that gets me excited with board games. All right. Ted Chev asks, after playing a game of Iberian Express, my group is talking about going 18xx for a crunchier experience. Has Cube Rails spiked your interest in 18xx? Is there something that's in between complexity-wise? Well, I'll admit, I'm not familiar with Iberian Express. I'm familiar with Iberian Rails, Iberian Gauge, and Iberian Railways, which are all Cube Rails style games. Maybe that's another one, or maybe you meant one of those. But in particular, with regards to 18xx, I actually played my first 18xx game essentially before I played any Cube Rails games. I've played 3 18xx games at this point, and I think when I've really kind of fallen into Cube Rails style games earlier this year, it made me interested in trying 18xx again, because I tried it a couple of years ago and I had a fine time with it, but it did not grab me in any way. And then after playing a bunch of these Cube Rails games this year, I did want to give it another shot and see maybe 18xx will actually catch me now that I'm really digging these 45 to 90 minute train games with stocks and auctions and that kind of thing. So I have played 2 18xx games over the last couple of months. One was 18 Chesapeake, and the other one was 18 EU with the drafting variant. And I enjoyed those plays to a certain extent. I liked 18 EU significantly more than 18 Chesapeake, but I will admit that those plays of 18xx games just made me realize how much I love the Cube Rails games, because those games are so long. Our play of 18 EU took 5-6 hours, I think, and in that time frame, I could have played 5 other Cube Rail style games. And I'm one of those people who loves variety and loves novelty, and I would much rather play 5 different Cube Rails games that each take about an hour to play versus one 18xx game that takes that same amount of time. I'm not saying people who love the 18xx games are wrong. That's just where I, in particular, fall with all of these things. 18xx games are just a little bit too long for me, and it isn't just the length. It's also the number of decisions that you make in my very tiny data set. It seems like you can often find yourself, again, from my tiny data set, in situations where for the last like 2 hours, you only make a couple of particularly meaningful decisions because you've set up your infrastructure, most of the tracks are out, you're doing little upgrades here or there and increasing your dividends here or there in small ways, and sometimes making big plays with stocks and whatnot. But in particular with 18EU, I felt like I made just a couple of good decisions in the last, or decisions at all, realistically, in the last half of the game, and I made a bunch of really fun, interesting decisions in the first half. So I think I would enjoy that one a lot more if it was just the first half of that game. But again, people who love these experiences and love these 18xx games like the full breadth of it, like seeing things run all the way to the end, and that's totally fine. But for me, I'm just focused on the Cube Rails games. I might try more 18xx in the future. I'm certainly not trying to dissuade anyone from trying it. If you're enjoying these Cube Rails style games, then definitely give 18xx a try. There's a bunch of them, and there's a seemingly explodingly vibrant community around 18xx games with people who actually are wanting people to get into it. Like, it seems like there's anti-gatekeeping with that part of gaming these days in a lot of corners of the internet. So definitely give it a shot, and maybe it'll be amazing for you, or maybe you'll realize you also prefer the shorter train game experiences. Oh, there was an add-on question there. Is there something that's in between complexity-wise? So as far as complexity is concerned, I was surprised at how not many rules were actually in most of these 18xx games. I've definitely heard people who like these games in the past say, like, the games are not that complicated. I don't know why people are so overwhelmed by them. And I kind of see where they're coming from, because there's a lot more rules in many of the heavyweight Euro games that come out these days, like, Teotihuacan or, something like that. I would argue probably has more rules than 18EU, but the complexity that comes from the decisions that you're making is absolutely there. Like, there's an incredible amount of depth that comes in there. So as far as something that's in between, the big thing that jumps out to me there is, well, I guess, two games. The first one is a game called Dual Gauge. Technically, this is still about a 60-ish minute game, although I think for some groups it takes about 90 minutes. And this one does toe the line between Cube Rails and 18xx, because in Cube Rails games, you're throwing cubes around, usually, not always, and doing those kind of things. But in Dual Gauge, you actually lay track onto the board, and it also has things like treasuries for the companies, which some Cube Rails games have. But it just seems like there's a little bit more 18xx in Dual Gauge than most other Cube Rail style games. So it gives you that vibe while still being like 60 minutes and not having a very difficult rulebook to get through. You also are running trains in a similar-ish way to 18xx games with Dual Gauge. So I highly recommend Dual Gauge, especially as a dipping your toes into 18xx. I think if you play Dual Gauge and enjoy that one, you will find 18xx even easier to get into, even though there are a couple things you'll have to change in your mind. Another one that just pops into my head is specifically one of the heavier Cube Rails games, which is Trans-Siberian Railway, just because that one is a little bit longer and a little bit more in depth with the stock holding and dividends and jockeying back and forth. It's more like a 90 to 2 hour game for some groups. For us, it's 90 minutes. But I would also maybe give that one a try just to see if you enjoy playing a 2-ish hour train style game. So yeah, I recommend both of those. Both of them are also designed by Amabel Holland, who is she's one of my favorite designers at this point. But yeah, those are just a couple of recommendations. Also, I've made videos for both Dual Gauge as well as Trans-Siberian Roads. So feel free to check both of those out and see if either of them grab you. Anyway, sorry for the really long train games answer there. Let's move on to Andy. And they ask, did you ever play Cloudspire? I watched your playthrough, but was wondering if you ever had a chance to play it with real people. No, the short answer to that one is I didn't. And honestly, a big part of that is because I did not think it was really a game for me. Like, I made a sponsored video for it, and I'm glad that I did, because I got to introduce a lot of people to the game so they could see if that was a game for them. But when I finished making that video, I kind of had a feeling like, I don't think I'm actually that interested myself in teaching this to somebody else and playing it. A big part of that is the teach. I mean, I guess I could have sent somebody else my video and they could watch that and then we could play it together. But I have to admit, it just didn't really line up with my interests, if that makes sense. And not that I'm saying it's a bad game. I can't really say that because I haven't played it with other people, but it just wasn't something I was all that interested in having happen. So no, I never actually did get around to playing Cloudspire. A lot of people seem to really like it. It does seem to also be somewhat divisive, and I have to admit, I felt pretty strongly that if I did end up playing it, that it probably wouldn't be one that I'd super enjoy playing as well. And with, only a certain amount of time to play games in general, I try to focus on playing games that I feel at least reasonably confident that I will enjoy. Thanks again, by the way, to everyone who's here. How many people are here? 36? Awesome, awesome, awesome. So far, it seems like the scroll is kind of working. All right, the next question is from Devin, and they ask, do you narrate your videos while playing the game, or do you record the audio later? I narrate it while I am playing. Recording it later would be incredibly time intensive. I just can't even imagine that. I actually made a video that I called Let's Make a Playthrough, and I put it out last May. So if you search for Let's Make a Playthrough Jongus Games, you'll find it. And I show the entire process, like a behind the scenes kind of thing for me making these videos, and you'll see exactly how I make it. I describe all of it in detail. So if you're interested in learning more, then definitely check that one out. I will say that sometimes I record corrections by overdubbing. In that case, I get my recorder out, put my microphone on, and then I kind of play the issue part in Final Cut, and I talk over it, and then I slice that in. But it's rarely more than a few seconds at a time, and usually I only have to do 0 to 3 of those for each video. When I just flub a word, I say row instead of column, or 2 instead of 4, or just the kind of things that can happen when your mouth is just going. T. Kumar says, I totally think your videos are as crisp and clear as other tutorial videos. Well, that's great to hear. And honestly, many people have mentioned that to me. They've said, don't stress about it. Don't spend time. Don't spend money. Don't worry about it. What you have is fine. And I get that. I certainly get that. But also, from my perspective, I see these other videos and it just feels better. But, there's a reason the grass is greener on the other side is a saying. And that might just be something that I'm falling into. Lilia says, I really feel the need for a new camera for huge games with a bunch of components. Do you make videos, Lilia? Just for context, I'm curious. T. Kumar asks, will you do a tutorial video? Oops. The chat. Hold on a second. For some reason, the chat just scrolled a lot. Let's see here. And it is definitely lagging a little bit. Pardon me while I catch back up to where we were at. I think I'm answering way too long for these questions, by the way. There's a lot of questions in here. All right, here we go. T. Kumar asks, will you be doing a tutorial video for City of the Big Shoulders, or was this purely dependent on Patreon votes? Yes, it's purely dependent on Patreon votes because the publisher of that company, I don't really have a relationship with them. I don't actually have a copy of the game even around to put it up for a vote. So for the moment, I don't have any plans to do a tutorial for it. If the publisher wanted me to make a sponsored video, I would certainly entertain that. That would definitely be a big project, though, that's for sure. Paul Cheesable asks, will you be doing a video for Tinder's Trail, and will you do other factions for Merchant's Cove? It doesn't seem likely that I'll be doing a Tinder's Trail video, which is a bit of a bummer. I've done a couple of sponsored tutorials for Alley Cat games in the past, but they come to me sometimes for some games, and other times they don't. And that was one of the projects they had where they didn't reach out to me, and that's totally fine. I totally get it. I've actually played Tinder's Trail 2 or 3 times, like 10 years ago, like the original version of the game, and I remember quite liking it. There were several times over the last decade where I almost bought a copy for relatively cheap that I saw somewhere because I remembered liking it. But that being said, I didn't actually end up backing the campaign for the new one. I'm not really sure why. I kind of go big and then soft on Kickstarter sometimes, and I think I was just in a lull where I wasn't really backing any of them. So I might acquire a copy of that one to try at some point, and if I do, then maybe it'll go up for the patrons to vote on. But I can't make any promises. And as, with regards to the factions in Merchant's Cove, I think it's pretty unlikely that I'll be making any other videos for that. I generally try to, make a video for a game and then move on from it. And I very, very rarely come back and cover expansion content. But, never say never. Chris says, for what it's worth, I've experienced OBS lagging on old computers when they start overheating, specifically on your 2010-ish MacBook Pro. Yeah, that's what frustrates me because a year ago, I bought this computer. It's not brand new anymore, I guess, but it was a top of the line, very expensive MacBook Pro that I bought a year ago, specifically because of video editing, and then having it lag on these kind of things is still kind of frustrating. But it seems like the scrolling is working good enough as long as it doesn't jump all the way to the bottom again. All right. Jinray asks, "What is the least favorite housework that you have to do?" Personally, it's ironing the laundry at my end. Well, I don't have to worry about ironing because I never iron. I'm one of those people. I essentially never iron clothes. My least favorite household task. What would that be? I used to say cooking. I used to really dislike cooking, but the pandemic happened, and from that, I kind of decided to try to get rid of that and like lean in to try and learn how to not be so anxious about cooking because I would just get really anxious and stressed about it. And I have, I think, pushed through that to the point where I really don't mind cooking. I don't mind doing the dishes, although I don't do them anywhere near as often as I should. Honestly, nothing is really popping into my head as something I actively dislike. Maybe mopping. Maybe that might be the one that I dislike the most. It's hard to say. Honestly, whenever I do household chores, I always put music on or a podcast, and it makes all of these things fine because I'm just listening to music or listening to a podcast while I do whatever it is I need to do. That's not to say I'm always super timely on it, but I definitely try to lean into these things. Nothing really jumps out to me as something that I hate, but that might be because I blocked it out of my memory. NJ mentioned that the Switch discount is specifically why you brought up Civ. Cool. I'm not sure how long the sale is on. Maybe I should give that one a try. You never know without trying it. And it's been quite a while. I think I'd probably prefer the Switch over the computer just because I could, relax on the couch or something like that while doing it. Knox says, regarding video quality, I think the sharpness are all good. I feel other channels play around with warm light and contrast probably a bit more. Maybe experiment with those kind of things a bit more. Again, I think lighting is probably the biggest thing. In my Let's Make a Playthrough video, I show how I like bounce light off of a curtain to bounce back on me so that I don't have crisp shadows behind me. And I think not having the shadows is great, but I think also maybe I'm losing something of the punch. I think there's probably something that can happen there. I mean, I am not a professional when it comes to photography or videography or any of that kind of stuff. Well, I guess technically this is my job, so I am a professional, but I'm amateur when it comes to being skilled at these kind of things. I've no like schooling with any of this kind of stuff. I'm just faking it till I make it, like so many people out there, and I think some people seem to fake it better than I do. Victory BHG says, I haven't heard more buzz on Squaring Circleville. What are your thoughts? It seems like a great Euro. So that is a game that went up on Kickstarter a couple months ago. It's being published by Spielworks, and the theme of it is there's this town in America somewhere. I can't remember exactly where it is, but is an actual town that was built with circles in mind, like a park in the middle, and then a circular road, and then a circular road outside of that, and outside of that. I guess the person who designed the town was a bit eccentric, and at some point, I think in the mid 1900s, the new town planners were like, "This is ridiculous. These roads should be straight. It's super hard to do anything in this town." So they squared the town by putting in straight roads and then getting rid of all the circular roads. And I think that's an amazing theme, first of all. I can't remember if I actually backed that one on Kickstarter. I got very close to it. The game looks quite intriguing, and it's one that I would certainly like to try. I know I was on the edge about backing it or not, and I can't remember which way I fell. But beyond that, that's really all I know. I watched a couple videos, but that was months ago, and I don't remember the specifics. But from a theme perspective, I think that one is super interesting. Paul Cheesable asks, "Did Oath take a toll on me?" No, because I haven't had a chance to try it. In my friend group, there was a little bit of talk about maybe trying it, but honestly, there weren't enough people who seemed interested to actually make a play of it happen. And there's so many other games happening that I don't know. I didn't feel particularly pushed to make it happen, considering a big rules read and then teach and all that kind of stuff. And also, the game looks interesting and there's a lot of hype for it. So I'm sure a lot of people would love to hear my thoughts on it. But also at the same time, I'm not super convinced I'd actually enjoy it, and I do try to spend my time playing games that I feel I'm more likely to enjoy than not, and I'm not sure where I am actually with Oath. I think I might respect it and appreciate it more than I actually enjoy it, but I won't know until I try it, and I'm not sure if I'll ever try it. I'm certainly not against it, though. Lilia asks, or says there is not much information about Sheepy Time. Still wondering if it is not feeling too much of a roll and move-ish game. It sure looks fun, but isn't it too chaotic and random? Well, I will say that we are still loving that game. I've played it 4 times now, and every time I've played it with new people, it's enamored everyone. The last play of it, we had an amazing time. It does start off a bit roll and movie, I guess. I mean, you always have 2 cards in your hand, and it's possible those cards are the same card, but the cards also, I think, almost always have 2 options on them. So even if you have 2 of the same card, you can make a decision from those. So, having a decision between the 2 cards, is a decision. That's not quite roll and movie. And the game can get quite combo-y. At the start, you're just kind of moving around the circle, but as you get deeper into the game, more and more actions and combos build up around it to the point where you can do all sorts of crazy stuff. I know I'm kind of glossing over how the game plays. I'm kind of assuming people know how it plays. It's a push your luck style game on a rondel where you're going around trying to avoid a nightmare, and you play cards from your hand, and on that rondel, when you land on spots, there are actions that you can do. And I'll say the last time we played, we had some amazing combos with like a spot where you could jump forward once, where one player set it up so they could land on a spot, jump forward once, and then that would move them backwards twice, and then they would trampoline off that spot to move forward a number of spaces equal to the card they played, and they did the, and then they had that land on another spot that let them move or gain a whole bunch of points based off of the tokens they had. And late game, we definitely had some pretty awesome situations with just a whole bunch of combos popping off, and we've enjoyed the game every single time we played it. At the moment, it doesn't really look like a tutorial for that one's going to be made. AEG reached out and said they might be interested in a sponsored tutorial, but that hasn't really become locked in, and that video has not been getting that many votes on the Patreon poll. So it's possible that I won't be making any other videos for it, but I will be hopefully playing more games of it. I can definitely tell you that. All right, next up, Jinray asks, since Merchants Cove video tutorial was a sponsored thing, is there a chance they might hire you for more videos of their upcoming games like Monsters on Board? You said sponsored by FFG. I don't think Final Fantasy Fantasy Flight Games sponsored that one. I can't remember who did. Oh, Final Frontier? Is that what FFG? I guess Fantasy Flight Game. Wow, that's the same acronym, isn't it? Anyway, they haven't reached out to me about making any other sponsored videos at this point, but hopefully they were happy with the Merchants Cove video. I would love to do more sponsored videos for them. So I'm hopeful, just like you are hopeful, but I don't actually know anything behind the scenes. All right, moving on. Shrey says that their favorite 6-player game is Medici. Check it out if you like auctions. I have heard the name Medici, the board game name, off and on for many, many years. I think I did hear that it was an auction, and so I didn't care about it because up until recently I didn't like auctions. But cool, that's a good thing to keep in mind. Maybe I will actually pay more attention to it and look into it a little bit more to see if that is a game that I might actually enjoy. 6-player Euro-y style games are somewhat rare, it's true. Although it seems like auction style games and a lot of these cube rail style games and whatnot can support higher player counts better for one reason or another. Victory BHG says, thanks, and you'll look into Feast for Odin. You just got Nusfjord, and it's not farming, and it fits in a good time frame for your group. Cool. Nusfjord. I definitely played it at BGG-Con. I'm trying to think of it compared to other ones. Man, some of these Uwe Rosenberg games, I get kind of confused. That one came out around the same time as a different one, and I can't remember which one that is. But either way, I remember enjoying those 2 games for the most part, one of them more than the other. Man, I am totally blanking on which one of those is which. Devin Stoddard asks, what are some ugly, drab, or poorly illustrated games that you love? The first one that jumps into my head is Hansa Teutonica. There's been quite a few versions of it to come out, but it seems like they all, for the most part, have a kind of, hill, the farmyard, what am I looking for? They all seem to have like just hillsides of Germany as like the art. Some of them are more vibrant in the future, but I actually own the first printing of the game. I got it from Germany. It was a dual language version, a very rough rulebook that I got back in 2010, I believe. And it was very drab. The newer ones are much brighter. The board for the one that we actually own, which I did do a video for, actually, you can see it there, it is very monotone. You've got a bored-looking dude on the front of the front cover. Like, it definitely has all of those boring Euro tropes going on, but the game is really cool. It's a really, really interesting game that I played like 30 plus times. So I think that is the first one to jump out. As far as others, nothing's really jumping into my head at this point, although I'm sure there's got to be some because I do enjoy Euros so much. Yeah, nothing else is really popping into my head. But if something does, then I'll mention it. Chris mentioned to Shrey that, yes, you saw something on Heavy Cardboard and it made you interested. What game was that? I'm just scrolling back up here to see what Shrey... Oh, Medici. Oh, Heavy Cardboard made a video about Medici. Well, maybe I'll watch that video and then learn more about it. That is good to know. By the way, thanks again to everyone who's here. All 38 people. That's awesome. That's awesome. I'm going to keep going for probably another 20 minutes or so, something like that. Victory BHG says, not sure I have seen any Lacerda games on your channel. Could be my ignorance. What are your thoughts on Lacerdas or equivalently complex games like Arkwright or Coffee Traders? Yeah, I don't think I've actually done any tutorial videos for Lacerda games. A big reason for that is because I don't have a professional relationship with Eagle-Gryphon Games. Something was maybe going to happen at certain points, but it never really seemed to go through. Maybe they just prefer other types of videos than the ones that I make. I really can't know. So that's a major factor in it. Also, while I have enjoyed playing many Lacerda games, many of them are not necessarily my favorite. Like, I enjoy the novelty of trying new games all the time, but only a couple of them are really games that I find myself being, interested in coming back to multiple times. Honestly, Mercado de Lisboa is one of my favorites, and that's a really short one. I would have no problem making a video for that one, but I don't actually have a copy of that game. I liked Escape Plan quite a bit, and On Mars is, I think, easily my favorite Lacerda game. There's a lot of rules there, but I played it several times, and the fact that I was able to play it a few times somewhat close together meant it didn't have that huge rules teach at the beginning, and I got to dig into what the game was doing a little bit more, and I really enjoyed what was going on there. I don't own a copy of that one either, so at this point, yeah, maybe I will continue to not make videos for Vital Lacerda games. It's not like a conscious choice, it just is something that's kind of happened, I guess, to a certain extent. And again, a big reason for that, I think, is because I just don't have a professional relationship with Eagle-Gryphon Games, and, there's a lot of publishers out there and a lot of games, so, some work well with me, and others, work with other media creators, and that's just kind of how it works. Paul Cheesable asks, what is your taste in music like? Well, I listen to a lot of music. I listen to music almost all day, every day. Pretty much the only time I'm not listening to music when I'm working is when I'm recording. Like, obviously, I'm not listening to music right now. Although, for a couple years, when I would be recording playthroughs, I would actually have earbuds in and listen to, like, calm, ambient, electronica type music when I was actually filming the video. I remember I did that for the Gloomhaven video that I made a very, very long time ago. But as far as my tastes, recently, like the last couple of years, I've leaned very heavily back into heavy metal, which is a type of music I loved when I was a teenager, back in the late 90s. I listened to a lot of that, and then in my college and then post-college, in the aughts, I was really primarily focused on electronic type music of various styles. For the past couple of years, my favorite artist has been Devin Townsend / Strapping Young Lad, which is a band that Devin Townsend made. He's, I think, my favorite musician that I've ever had. I've listened to every single one of his albums many, many times over the last few years, and lots of other metal type stuff as well. Although I oftentimes also fall back on more ambient type electronica stuff. It really depends on my mood, but for the most part, if I'm in the mood for heavy metal, I listen to that. If I'm not listening to heavy metal, it's probably electronica type stuff like Tycho or Joey Fahrenbach or Ulrich Schnaus is one that I've listened to a ton of. So yeah, I guess it's two very different temperaments. If I want calming and soothing or just like heavy energy, screaming, loud, super heavy drums. In particular, I just love drums in music. In particular, just fast drums, very drum prominent sounds is something I like. I essentially like drums as like a primary instrument as opposed to a backing instrument. And in particular, I love music that has like, well, I jokingly call it orchestral blast beats, essentially like, big orchestral sounds with, violins and, all that kind of stuff going on while you have like some crazy drumming going at the same time. I just really dig that kind of stuff. And Devin Townsend does that sort of thing somewhat often. I will admit my biggest issue with heavy metal is I'm just not a fan of the screaming. It's just not a thing that I enjoy. So there are some music that I enjoy, like what is it? Animals as Leaders is a type of music where there's in generally no audio. Sorry, no audio. There's no vocals. So it's like heavy metal without vocals, and I really dig that kind of stuff. I also loved Dragon Force for years. Back in the late aughts, I was very heavy into Dragon Force, specifically because they weren't screaming at me. It was great, energetic, awesome heavy metal, and then they were like crooning about dragons and valleys and all that kind of stuff instead of just growling in my ears, which is definitely the kind of thing I prefer. T Kumar asks, how long does it take for you to make your tutorial videos for medium to heavyweight games like Marco Polo 2, for example? Let's see, for a game like that these days, the overall project, probably around 10 hours, maybe a little bit less than that. It kind of varies. Many hours recording the actual raw video, probably something on the order of 4 to 6. But usually there's, an hour or two of setting the game up and relearning the rules, and then editing usually takes a little bit less than the amount of time it takes to actually record. So if I have 4 hours of raw video, it'll probably take me about 3 hours to edit that. So these things add up. Certainly more than your average 8-hour business day, that's for sure. Chris Lodgson says, Dual Gauge is awesome, and you 100% agree. Wow, I talked about Dual Gauge a while ago. I think I fell pretty far behind here on the old chat. But yeah, I'm really digging it. Specifically about Dual Gauge, the base game has 2 maps in it. And from my personal perspective, the maps are fine, but the game is significantly more interesting with expansion maps. Right now, there's only 1 expansion map pack, which is the Wisconsin and Honshu maps, but I've actually been able to playtest some of the next expansion maps that are going to be coming out later, and I'm not going to talk about the details of them, but I've been really enjoying those in particular. So that's definitely been amping up my love for Dual Gauge. So it's a system that does seem to be like it's going to be supported into the future with lots of different maps that definitely shake things up. So I do think that starting with the base Portugal map is probably the right way to go. But in my opinion, if you think you're going to like it, I don't know, maybe invest in the map pack as well. That's definitely money. I can't tell people how to spend their money, but I think the Wisconsin and Honshu maps are significantly more interesting than the maps that come in the base game. But the overall system is super solid and very flexible to account for lots of different shakeups of how the game plays with new maps. Jesse has caps lock on, I think. And oops, we just scrolled a bunch. No, chat. There we go. Jesse, who has caps lock on, says, if you were to own a friendly local game store, what would you do to make it stand out from other stores? Wow, I do not have a good answer to you for that. I honestly don't really visit FLGSs that often anymore. I used to, like 10 years ago. That's where the game nights that we used to participate in were held at. And I, every now and then go into one to maybe get a game, but I, for the most part, get games sent to me or buy games online these days, especially in the middle of the pandemic. So I don't have a good answer for you. I wish I did. I mean, I definitely would want to make a welcoming and warm, inclusive type atmosphere for sure, because board games are amazing and I want everyone to feel welcome in those types of situations. I don't know. I've seen a lot of good things in friendly local game stores, like recommendation notes printed on the shelf talking about the different games. And I've definitely been in ones before where people are super friendly, like people who work there for other people. I've definitely also been in ones where people are not as friendly. So I guess I would just lean into the things that I've seen that are good at other stores, like friendly staff who love board games and are totally open to whatever type of thing new people want, because maybe the best game for this new customer is something that person who works there isn't actually interested in, but being able to figure out what they're going to like instead of just pushing your own opinion on things is, I think, important. But yeah, I guess just try to be nice. Try to be welcoming. I think that's the primary thing. Make people want to come back. which, some stores do a really good job of and others don't. In particular, board game cafes seem to do a very good job of it. So I guess I would emulate a board game cafe to a certain extent, although I, probably wouldn't want to have to go into all the food and beverages and all those kind of things as well. Oops. All right. Jinrei asks, with the freight crisis still in full swing, would you think it's a bad idea for upcoming Kickstarters to include some reduced shipping as a stretch goal? Wow, I really can't weigh in on the container apocalypse that's happening right now, beyond knowing that every publisher that I know of is saying that shipping is ludicrously expensive now, 4 to 5 times more expensive than it used to be, which is really going to mess up your models when you plan a year or two ahead. And you've been doing this for many years, and you think you know what's going on, and then suddenly you get this huge curveball of shipping being super crazy. I do think there's going to be some sort of ripple effect through board gaming, and in particular the Kickstarter part of board gaming. But I think that ripple effect is probably going to take a while to really be seen, and it might have a pretty long-standing wave effect. I'm not really sure what that ripple effect is going to be. I'm not sure if it's going to be people backing less games because they're worried about them not arriving. I'm not sure if it's just publishers with higher goals or just charging more money for these things. I don't know, but I have a hard time imagining all this happening and it not causing some form of change. Maybe publishers will start putting games in slightly smaller boxes than they were before so they can fit more into a super expensive container. But of course, if you have a smaller box, there's other ramifications of that as well, which I cannot really weigh in on because I have no experience with publishing board games. Lilia says, I'm not making videos on my own. Just in my experience, the quality of video becomes really important when the camera is further away to cover a big game board. So it's hard to see the details. Yeah, and that's personal. That's why I have the camera that I have. A lot of board game channels seem to have a camera way high up above, looking at everything, but you can't really see the details. And some people like Rado have a kind of a zoom in focus camera off to the side, which is pretty cool. For me, I got a camcorder that has an optical zoom, so like actual glass lenses. When I zoom in, it zooms in optically, not digitally, so it hypothetically keeps that same quality, which it does seem to do overall, on average anyway. Let's see here. T. Kumar asks, what is the last board game that you played? Well, I've actually been playing quite a few games recently, but of course, as soon as I start thinking about it, they fly out of my head. There we go. I played Imperial Steam yesterday. I have the worst memory ever. So there is a tabletop simulator mod for Imperial Steam, which is a game that's currently up for pre-order for Capstone Games. It's going to be their Essen release. It's a heavyweight Euro game with some logistics and honestly a lot going on. I played a 3-player game of that with a couple friends, and we all really enjoyed it. It was not particularly short. The game itself took us about 2.5 hours, and the teach took about an hour to go through, but it was also my first time teaching it and the first time playing it for all of us. But we all really enjoyed it, and we're all looking forward to trying to get this one played more. I literally played that one yesterday, and I already had started to forget what was going on, but that was a really fun game, and I'm hoping to get more plays of it in. I'm sure I'll be talking about it in a Good Games vlog at some point, although I might wait until I get another game in just based off of the other games that I'm playing. We'll have to see. Maybe I'll end up playing something tonight and then do a Good Games vlog tomorrow. I tend to do those kind of shooting from the hip. I don't really plan ahead for those, so we'll just have to see. Devin says, your videos and production feel feel pretty top-notch to me. You've become one of my favorite go-to game channels. Minor nitpick, maybe use a better playmat if you think you need to improve, something that's not beige. That's interesting that you say that, because underneath this this tablecloth right here, this fabric, is a very reflective table. And Jessica and I actually picked this cloth out from a bargain bin at a Joann's like 6 years ago, something like that, a long time ago, specifically because we were looking for something that was a neutral backdrop, but we got one that's got little flecks of brownish color in there just so it's a little bit varied as well, but we didn't want something that would be prominent, like, bright red or green or blue or something like that, because we didn't want certain components to be lost on it. I will say that after years of putting games on here, hundreds of games on here, a lot of prototypes that might have like soot on them and whatnot. It is getting dirtier. And in fact, a few months ago, many months ago, something like that, we tried to wash it. We hemmed all the edges and we put it in the washing machine, and it came out looking just like this. So in the back of my head, I've been wondering if maybe it makes sense to try and invest in something that's a little bit new and a little bit less faded and worn down. I mean, I'm sitting here with my arms on this thing, and I'm clean, but, over the years, these things just kind of build up, and, I don't blame you for thinking it might be a little bit boring overall, but it was hypothetically supposed to be boring. It was supposed to let the game itself pop, but, maybe something different might be good. It's certainly something to consider. Jinrei asks, would I recommend the Stafford Dynasty, an Andreas Stedding game? Yes, I really like the Stafford Dynasty. I own a copy, and I've owned a copy for years. I even got it played a year ago or so. I think it has some really cool ideas going on. It's got an awesome action selection system where your actions are variable, and the sooner you take I guess when you take your turn is dictated by what you decided to do on the previous turn. So I'm trying not to go into all the specifics of it, but it has this really kooky mechanic where you have the circular board, kind of like a rondelle. I guess I could have considered that sort of for the Rondelle's video, where you actually trickle things out almost Mancala-like, and then you pick them up at different points. There's a lot of puzzly stuff going on. I'm trying not to go into the specifics, but I will say that that game also has one of my favorite board game mechanisms, which is incentivization, where as people ignore a thing, it gets better until somebody decides not to ignore it and do the thing and then cash it out. I've been really impressed with the Stafford Dynasty. I will admit there's one thing that rubs me wrong about it, and that is the endgame scoring cards that are based off of patterns on the board. I don't love those, and honestly, that kind of detracts the game a little bit. Like, it pulls it from being like maybe a 9 out of 10 for me to down to like 7 or 8 out of 10. But I still like the game enough to have it in my collection, and I don't really see myself getting rid of it. Just talking about it right now makes me feel like I would love to play that game again. It's got some really cool puzzly, combo-y type stuff going on. And I guess it's a kind of a boring looking thing. I mean, like, it's very brownish beige, going back to the other question, but it's got a lot of filigree and little details that I like as well. So I don't know. I don't think I'd call that a boring looking game, especially considering how Euro-y it is. It definitely fits into that vibe, although some people would probably disagree with me there. Paul Cheesable asks, all-time, oops. Let's see here. Okay. Paul Cheesable asks, all-time favorite game? Question mark. Mine has to be Brass Birmingham. As of right now, I think it'd be hard for me not to say Tichu. Sometimes I say A Feast for Odin Norwegians, which I talked about a little bit earlier, but I've played Tichu hundreds of times. In fact, I got to play that last week for the first time in like a year and a half or something like that. And that's a game I played literally hundreds of times, and I've only played it like 2 or 3 times in the last 5 years. I adore that game. It's just an amazing ladder climbing partnership style game, and playing it again last week made me remember just why I adore that game. So yeah, I love all these, medium Euros. I like heavy Euros. I like all these train games, but ultimately I think, currently my favorite game, it's a little card game, but it's so much fun. Matthew Dunstan is here. Hey, welcome. He asks or says, "Hi, John and chat. Question: Do you like to set a schedule every day for working John Gets Games? What is your favorite snack between filming?" I don't usually set a schedule. It really depends. If I look at my schedule, well, I guess I'll pull back on that and say that, yes, I have a release schedule ongoing as I go through that year, so that I make sure that I don't overcommit myself, so I know what videos I'm planning on putting out in each week. But when it comes to what I'm doing on a specific day, I rarely schedule that out beyond just sitting down at my computer and saying, I should work on that today. But sometimes things get really crammed, and if I'm looking at my schedule and realizing my release schedule is ambitious, then at that point I might plan 1, 2, or even 3 weeks ahead. I've got a part of my scheduler where I can go day to day and say, okay, well, this I should finish this day, this I should finish that day. And specifically, I usually do that to figure out if I'm actually in trouble. Like, if I plan out 2 weeks ahead and realize there's no way I'm actually going to get all these videos done, well, then I fortunately have a couple weeks to do some damage control and maybe talk to some publishers about pushing a video back or something like that. But for the most part, I just kind of in my head know what the next thing is, and once I finish a video, I look to my list and what's the next video to work on. Okay, I'll work on that one, and I got a couple hours today or something like that. I'll sit down and learn the next game, and then okay, I learned the game and I sent some questions to the publisher. Tomorrow, I'll film the game, and then the day after that, I'll probably edit it. Or if things go well, then maybe I'll edit it tomorrow. It's that kind of thing. Considering it's just me here, I can, for the most part, get by with that, just kind of floating in my head, a constant ongoing task list of things that I want to do. And also, if one thing isn't really working out, maybe shift something else in to try and fill that gap in place. So yeah, I kind of wing it. And regarding my favorite snack between filming, let's see here. Well, it depends on what kind of filming is going on, because over the last many, many months, my favorite snack has been frozen blueberries. It was my wife Jessica's idea, just as like a nice snack to just munch on. We just take them out of the freezer, pour them into a bowl, and eat them. It's like a kind of an ice creamy kind of sensation. It isn't really ice cream; it's more like Dippin' Dots, if anything. But yeah, frozen little crunchy blueberries is something I like. But I'm only going to do that during the day if I'm not going to be filming myself, because that gets all up in your mouth in a very gross way. So I definitely don't have those snacks when I think I'm going to be filming myself at anytime soon. But for the most part, during the middle of the day, honestly, my go-to snack is usually a slice of cheese. If I'm feeling peckish or something like that, I'll just go to the fridge and grab a slice of cheese and then keep going. If there's cheese in there, I definitely lean on that somewhat often. Hey, thanks for the super chat, Ross. Ross asks, question, thoughts on Cascadia? I enjoyed your playthrough of Public Market, and any chance you could include some sort of snippet in the beginning of your videos about how heavy a game is. My thoughts on Cascadia, to start things off, are it's a game I'd like to try. I watched somebody's video of that a while ago, and I remember thinking that it looked pretty clever. That's kind of all I remember, though. I believe it's an abstract game where you're putting different animal tokens down onto different spots, and I think based off of how you draft those animal tokens, you get different opportunities. That's all I remember, but I do remember thinking that it's a game that I would love to try at some point, but I haven't actually had a chance to. And regarding snippets at the beginning of the video about how heavy a game is, that's interesting. I mean, I know I put at the beginning like the overall player count and how much time it usually takes to play. As far as listing up a heaviness, that one is a little bit more subjective. Part of me feels like the playtime that I put there at the beginning of the video should hopefully offer some idea of how heavy the game is going to be. Although some long games are not particularly heavy, and some short games can be quite heavy. I'll keep it in mind. I'm not really sure how I would go about doing that, but I wouldn't necessarily say that I wouldn't be able to figure something like that out. Zombie God asks, what is the hardest rulebook / game you have ever tried to learn? Um, Ever tried to learn? I would say probably the original rule book for 1867. That was the first 18xx game that I played. This was a couple of years ago, before I'd played any of those or really any of these cube rail style games. And I had a planned get together where I was going to be playing this with some 18xx people. And they told me that they would teach it to me. But before that, I figured, well, I'll just read the rules first. And then when they teach me the rules of the game, it'll kind of really get locked into my head. And I got about a quarter through that rulebook and stopped. It made no sense at all to me. It was definitely the hardest rulebook that I've ever tried to get through. And I like I said, I failed. There's too many terms, too many assumptions that the rulebook had about what I should know in order to figure it out for me to work. As far as the hardest rulebook that I've had to learn that I actually was able to figure out, that would probably be Feudum. That one still takes the cake. That rulebook was very dense, very long. That video took an incredible amount of time to put together as well. Yeah, I think I would put that up there as far as a game I actually did learn from the rulebook, but as far as the most difficult one to learn from the rulebook. Uh, that's funny. Hedo V Metal says SYL and Devin Townsend rule. Ziltoid, yes, fully agree. Ziltoid, the Omniscient, the first one, is one of my favorite albums. I've listened to that one over and over and over again, especially when setting up a lot of these games, and frequently when editing. So I'm a really big fan of that album. It is incredible. Devin says, all right, I perked up. Oops. Come on, chat. Don't lag on me now. Uh, Devin says, all right, I perked up when I heard heavy metal, even more so when I heard SYL, horns up, dude. SYL stands for Strapping Young Lad, which is a very angry, very loud type of music, but I really like that stuff sometimes. Some of those albums are pretty incredible. City is an amazing album. I've listened to that one over and over again. Honestly, there's been weeks where I would just listen to City, and then I listened to Ocean Machine, and then I listened to City again, back to back. Those two albums came out from Devin Townsend in the same year, and they're so different from each other. Anyway, I could talk about his music for a while, but those were amazing albums. Let's see here. Morgan says, when you do rules reading and writing, what is your process, and what are you looking for? Well, rules reading and writing. Well, as far as reading is concerned, the first thing that I jump to is the setup page. If I'm actually going to be doing a tutorial, I'm going to jump to the setup page and really go through all those things. If I'm just trying to figure out if I'll like the game or not, then I usually skip over the setup and I just maybe look at the components list to get an idea of what different things are called. And then I just scroll through the rulebook until I find a part that says like, your turn, or like main actions or something like that, or you know, the game flow. So there really are different perspectives there. Like if I'm reading the game to know how to teach it to other people, I will start at the very beginning and work my way all the way through it. But if I'm just trying to get the vibe, I just try to jump into the meat of it to see like, what are the mechanics and how do they actually work together? Because, you know, those are two different things. With regards to writing rulebooks, I don't have that much experience of that up to this point, but in general, I start by writing an outline, like a super bare bones outline, so that I can then move things around to figure out what the order is going to be, and then I add some detail to it. Actually, this brings up an interesting thing. The only rule book I've written from start to finish at this point is Darwin's Journey, and that one, I actually did an interview with Thundergriff Games. They interviewed me about it, and we talk about the rules writing process, specifically working with them. So if you're interested in learning, in hearing me talk a bunch about writing a rulebook, in particular that one, then definitely look that one up. I mentioned it in the update vlog for July. So if you look for my July 2020 update vlog, there should be a link to it in the description, so you could jump right over there and see it if that's something that you are interested in. Paul Cheesable says, your taste in music has made me want to sign up to your patron. Strapping Young Lad brings me back. Have you listened to Irish Band Therapy? In short, what do you get for your pound in your patron? I don't really understand the last sentence there, and I haven't heard of Irish Band Therapy, so maybe I'll look into that. Funny thing about Strapping Young Lad, when I was first kind of getting into these things a couple of years ago, it was mostly through Spotify, just random heavy metal playlists, and I remember figuring out I like Devin Townsend, specifically listening to Empath a whole bunch, right when it first came out, actually a little bit before that. And then I remember hearing this other band and being like, man, this band is amazing. And I, like, oh, it's called Strapping Young Lad. Interesting. And I listened to them, a couple of their albums, before one day I was like, man, that singer sounds just like that of the singer. And I punched it into Google and I just slapped myself in the head. I'm like, it's the same guy. No wonder you like this music and that music. I had no idea. I'd listened to a bunch of their music before I made that actual connection. The music styles are very different, but it's the same singer, same voice. Let's see. Successful Geek says, happy Monday. Happy Monday to you too as well. I just realized that it's past 2. So I think on that note, I'm going to work my way through the last of the questions, but if you don't mind, maybe not ask any more questions so I can get through all these and then we can wrap this up. Shrey says, woo, I like it when I hear others talk about how they really like the Stafford Dynasty. It is a really well done midweight Euro, and I'm fine with the endgame scoring cards. Yeah, it kind of fell through the cracks a little bit. I think that one came out in 2012, 2013, something like that. And, a lot of bigger other things came through. Also, even though that was a couple of years after Hansa Teutonica came out, which is also designed by Andreas Steding, I feel like Andreas Steding didn't really get a lot more well-known in the general board gaming sphere until Gugong happened. And so I think, Stafford Dynasty happening earlier than that is part of the reason why a lot of people just don't know about it or haven't really heard much about it. But I strongly recommend it. I think it's great. I do think it's great. Stephen Alfarieri? Sorry, Stephen asks, what are your opinions on Ank's merge mechanic? My opinions are, I know nothing about Ankh besides it's got a bunch of miniatures, so I actually don't know anything about the mechanic. Sorry about that. T. Kumar says, what did I say about Stafford Dynasty? Well, I will say that I'm going to post a edited version of this video up tomorrow, so you should be able to scroll forward and find that spot. Also, this video right here, I'll probably leave it up as unlisted, so you could just scroll backwards and see me talking about that one a whole bunch if you like. Upstairs Booch says, will you be doing a playthrough for the game of Istanbul? That seems very unlikely. Never say never, but I don't own a copy of that one. I don't know anyone who owns a copy of it. So, and I doubt the publisher would want me to do a sponsored video for a game that's that old. I have played Istanbul once or twice, and honestly, I was not that impressed. I liked the dice game a lot more. I don't really remember all my specific reasons for disliking Istanbul. I think a big part of it was it just seemed like you kind of did the same thing over and over again because you like walk a path and then you're incentivized to kind of walk backwards on that path to do the same things that you just did. It didn't really do that much for me, which is why I don't have a copy. And if I don't have a copy, it's not going to win a Patreon poll vote for a video to be made. So I do think it's unlikely. T. Kumar says, P.S. I love your shirt. Is that part of the merch on your website? No. This is a shirt that I picked up on Shirt Woot, I think. I don't remember the actual name of it. My old career was event lighting, so this made a lot of sense. You got little light bulbs on the shirt and everything like that. I really like this shirt. Maybe I'll try to look it up and post a link somewhere. You know what? When I post this video up tomorrow, feel free to write a comment to remind me to post a link replying to you to actually get a link to the shirt, because I should be able to find it somewhere. Zombie God asks, what was the last film you watched and what would you recommend? Are you looking forward to the new Dune film? Well, I actually watched a movie last night. I watched the new Suicide Squad movie that came out on HBO Max, and it was fine. It was fine. And I liked it more than most other DC movies that I've watched, but I liked it less than many of the Marvel movies. In general, I really like sci-fi type stuff. I like action as well. I rewatched, what was it, Mad Max Fury Road a month or two ago, and was once again blown away by how amazing that game, that movie was. Two of my favorite movies are Interstellar and Arrival, which are both sci-fi movies, which are just amazing. So yeah, I would recommend those. And as far as the Dune movie is concerned, yes, I am quite interested in watching it. I wouldn't say I have super high expectations, but I want to see it. It looks beautiful, and I read many of the Dune books when I was a teenager. I can't remember exactly how many. I definitely read until it got super duper weird, and I read some of the other stuff that was written by Frank Herbert's son. I think I read 4 or 5 books in, and I always, I think, preferred the first book. I really did like the first book, so watching a movie of that first book sounds like fun. There's some really cool epic stuff that happens there, and I'm definitely looking forward to seeing it, although it might not be great. I'm going to try not to go into it with super high expectations. All right, I think that is going to bring this one to a close. Thank you so much to everyone who joined in live and everybody who watches this or listens to it on the podcast later on. This was a good one. It's not very often I get to talk about movies or music, really. I mean, I love talking about board games. This is all about board games, but sometimes it is fun to talk about other things that I really personally enjoy. But yeah, I think that is going to bring this to a close. Thanks again, everybody.